If you have a story to tell or a message to share with the world, you want to amplify your impact.
A lot of people have ideas and vision, and it could be the greatest idea ever. But are they obsessed enough to get there? Where's your zone of genius? What is the thing that you and only you can do and do it effectively and do it better than anybody else? And if you could build out a recipe that you know where the bar is and you want to exceed that bar, then we could deliver on what they want every time.
And today we're going to meet with a startup founder, Billy Samoa Saleeby, who is the founder of Podify, a production company that helps founders and really anyone who wants to share their message with the world and make a huge impact. Billy, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, John, thank you for having me. I'm super excited talking about a subject that I love, which is impact. Can't wait to dive in.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. I always love to, get right into the launch, grow, and thrive. I think it would be really helpful. I'd love to have for everyone to hear your startup story of such a great story.
Well, it started in junior high when I was selling blow pops, the candy, to the kids in school. And I always thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but it never happened. I started in the entertainment business, and that was kind of being an entrepreneur because I produced my own movie, and it was an amazing journey. And the movie did really well, won awards, got picked up for distribution. But as I reflected and looked at what I did the 7 years of my life making the movie, did I make enough income for that to support me and my family? And the answer was a resounding no. So I spent a decade in the renewable space and corporate space, working for companies like Tesla and Solar City, building training programs, built the onboarding program. And when I left, I decided, how do I combine my love of creating, which is the entertainment background, with my love of educating, which was my corporate background, and a podcast was a natural fit. So I started my own podcast, quickly realized, as you have, there's a lot of layers to the process. You got to create systems and bring people into the equation to allow you to do it. So I built a team. And when I built my team, I realized if I need help, other people need help. And that's really how Podify was born. It really became something that I needed for myself. And then I built it bigger so that I could support other people on their own journey.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I always say, like, entrepreneurship in a lot of ways can be the answer to the starving artist, because so many times it's like, the creative arts of all different kinds, whether it's film or writing or any kind of visual arts or digital arts. A lot of times it's like some of the most talented, most hardworking have trouble figuring out where's the monetization model, where's the money model? How does this all come together? And it's such a very cool story to hear the way you brought those two things together. I love that. So talk about when you first started out providing this to others, who was the perfect customer and how did you really help them the most?
I didn't know at first, but where it's crystallized and what it was to start with are kind of different things. So where it started was, who do I know who might need help, and who do they know, people that I know in my warm market that might need help. So my original early clients, they came through referral. They knew me, they trusted me, and therefore they gave me a shot. So early client was Dr. Laura Berman. She had her own show on Oprah. She was Oprah's love and relationship expert that was on her show all the time. And my previous boss actually referred me. They were in YPO with her husband, and they said, "Hey, talk to this guy, Billy. He's got a production company." And so we've been working together for the last 4 years. And so what's interesting about Laura is she actually, she is an example of what we strive to find today, which is impact makers, people that have a purpose-driven cause. So for her, it's twofold. It's helping people love and be loved better, and it's helping people in going through grief. She actually lost her son, and she's been on a grief healing journey for the last 3 years. And so what we strive to find right now are people who are doing something that they feel called to do. And that's where the purpose part comes in. And so when there's purpose, there's a much greater likelihood that there's going to be impact on the other end of that. And so it's part the person and what they're doing. And then the other piece to it is time. Do they need to buy back some of their time by having someone else handle all of the back end work? So if those two things are true, if they're purpose driven and they want to make an impact, and then do they want to buy back their time and not have to do all the legwork themselves, that's the type of client that we strive to find.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, I think about, when I think of the audience, a lot of this audience, which is, founders, startup founders, that's such a key thing. It's like, how can I buy back my time?
Mm.
I call it the principle of 168. We all have 168 hours every week.
Yep.
we can't get any more of them. We can't get any less of them. But what you can do is decide how you use them. And one of the ways you can get more out of them is if you can buy that time back and get someone else to do it. And a lot of times I'll challenge founders I'm working with. It's like, are you wasting time, or are you, spending time, or are you investing time?
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of what you're saying really fits into that. It's like you can invest more time by being strategic about where you focus the activities you're doing versus what do I hire someone else to do?
Successful people buy back their time. That's the reality.
Absolutely.
Like, they are much more willing to pay a high price for their time than someone else. And it's because they realize that's the one commodity that we all have. That's the great equalizer. We all have the same amount of hours, minutes, days, weeks, months, in a year. We may not live the same amount of life. Okay. But everybody's year is the same in terms of amount of time. How you use it, how you leverage it, that's the difference.
Absolutely. So talk about how you do that for those that come in to work with Podify. What are some of the ways that you help give back that time? In a sense, you're allowing them to buy that time back.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to figure out what they currently do and what they are good at and want to keep doing, and then what do they not want to do. And I think this is true with life in general. Where's your zone of genius? What is the thing that you and only you can do, and do it effectively and do it better than anybody else? And if you're not spending your time predominantly on those things, then you're mismanaging your time allocation. And so what we do is we say, okay, these are the things that we want to work on and that we like working on and that we're good at. And therefore you're going to keep doing those. And then everything else is on the table for how do we find somebody to do that? And in the case of working with us, we're going to do all of the production, like the editing of the video and the making the social content and the publishing and the outreach to guests and all the things that go in on the back end. I don't need to get through every part of the equation, but we typically like the person who we're working with to record it and forget it, so that then they pass it off and they have the trust and confidence that we're on the back end going to make something that they're proud of. And a big part of that is the recipe and getting clarity around what good looks like. You and I were having a conversation about thumbnails. Everyone's got a different approach and style, but there are some concepts and there are some best practices. And if you could build out a recipe that where the bar is and you want to exceed that bar, then we could deliver on what they want every time.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember at one point you described to me there's kind of 3 big phases to the project. It might be interesting to just hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's like 3 legs to the stool. There's production, there's marketing, and there's monetization. Most of the time, people index their time on the production, call it 80%, when in actuality, they should probably spend 80% of their time on the marketing and monetization and 20% of their time on the content. And so this is a very common mistake, is that a lot of thought, energy, and attention's on building the content. I'm not saying that's not important. Like, you need to have good content, but you also need to have a marketing strategy. And so what we do is we look at, there's levers. Lever 1 is organic, lever 2 is collaboration, and lever 3 is paid media. And each one of these can do something to grow your audience. And each one of them has a specific strategy or strategies that you could deploy to get the results that you want. And on the monetization front, there's so many ways you can monetize. You could create an ecosystem. You could sell your own product. You could do advertising, sponsorship. You could sell other people's products, but you got to figure out what's the right approach for your show. Every show is a little bit different. So you don't want to do what is probably not a good idea for your show. I mean, let's face it, most podcasts are not a business. Most podcasts by themselves are not going to be able to be monetized because they just don't have the downloads. Now, if you're advertising and you're thinking you're going to make money on a podcast, you're probably not. Now, you might make money on a sponsorship, which is a cousin to advertising, but that works if you have a hyper specific niche and that potential sponsor knows who your audience is.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the money model is the hardest part. And nature of what I do, I spend a lot of time working with student entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of interest in, social media, like building a social media following and a social media brand. But one of the things that's very clear is a lot of young people in particular know how to build a huge following. But the bigger question is, well, how do I turn that following into money? Because what the platforms pay for content is actually borderline exploitive. When you look at people that have big followings, they actually don't pay very much.
Yeah.
And at the same time, with a good money model, someone that has a strong following can really achieve a lot and really get financial freedom and the ability to really focus on that type of work, as we've seen examples of. I know you've talked a lot about just how some of the ways that you can achieve that. Love to hear some more of those, just your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on community.
Mhm.
And I think that's the way things are sort of trending right now, that the creator economy is moving more to a model that will allow people to own their audience and deplatform, meaning not
Yeah.
be so heavily reliant on social media. So you see this with Substack and newsletters. You see this with Mighty Networks or Circle
Careful.
or
Yeah.
Uscreen with community, building membership platforms. And so I would look at those opportunities to create recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is always going to beat selling something one off, because you got the marketing campaign, all the things that go into it. They're they're labor intensive, they're they're cost intensive, and it's just a lot of your time and energy that goes into pushing out a singular course or a singular product. And so if you could get people into an ecosystem where they pay on a regular basis and they feel like the value is well beyond what they're paying, and that's a key part, and you
Yeah.
get the retention. And so I'm pretty bullish on that. And then aside from that, you're right. Like, the platforms are not going to pay a whole lot. But what I do think is, if you have a very clear picture of who your audience is, you could then target the right people who
Yeah.
want to talk to that audience. This goes back to the sponsorship principle. The more hyper specific your audience is, the easier it is for you to make a compelling case to a potential sponsor. And sponsorships, that's just sales. You just got to find people, and if you're good at sales, you have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 package that's
Yeah.
outlined. And think of what you're doing as a media company, not just a podcast, not just a YouTube channel, but
Yeah.
a media company where you have the newsletter, you have all the things you're doing, speaking, and then you can sell this vision to prospective sponsors and say, hey, do you want to be a tier 1 sponsor? Here's what you get. You get mentioned in the newsletter, CTAs in the podcast and YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore they say, I want to speak to this audience because it's exactly the audience that I want to talk to.
Yeah. Well, and that's where it's just so important to build that following and to have a following that you can define in ways, not just, I think a lot of people think of, those that know a little enough about marketing to be dangerous, think about demographics and, those kinds of things, but it's the psychographic thing that can be really more important. It's like, what's the mindset of the people that go and actively look at your content, follow your brand, those kinds of things. That just becomes a really good way to define this is who the audience is, and I can bring whatever message, it's like, as a sponsor, I can present you to this audience.
Mm. Well, what problems are you solving? Bottom line, like, the more clarity you have around your audience, and I'm sure Daryl Eves, and every expert on YouTube or podcasts, they're always going to say, who is your audience?
Mhm.
And get clarity on that above all else. If you have clarity on that, then you know how to be an advocate for them, and you know what solutions, ideas, concepts you could present to them that will help them in the way they need it the most. So, what is the hair on fire problem that each of that your audience is facing? And if you could understand that, intimately understand that, then you'll constantly be looking for ways to provide help. And that's ultimately what you want in any type of scenario. Business, you're helping other people find a solution to a problem they need, or they know they need, or maybe they even don't know they need, but you present it and then they realize, oh, I do need this.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I think for startup founders, it's particularly important. And I've had a lot of startup founders say, like, I just don't have time for social media. And it's like, well, to me, it's like you don't build a following to be popular on social media when you're a startup founder. You build a following on social media around, who has a problem that you're trying to fix with your startup. And in a
Mm,
sense, that's, if you have defined that well, in a business model canvas, we call that the customer segment, demographic, psychographic, specific problem, experiential connection. And, they have a problem, they're dealing with a problem there, which probably means they're operating in a particular context. Well,
mm,
to me, if a startup founder, and, I know you like to call it like purpose driven, impact driven, if someone's like, I really am all about this group of customers. I want to, like you said, advocate for them, or I want to inform them. I want to provide them with value. It's, one thing I think founders think, oh, I got to get out there and talk about my product. It's like, no, that's the opposite. Like, don't talk about the product. What's the problem, and what's the larger context? And you, who hopefully have spent more time looking at this than anybody else, what value can you bring to that group of customers, where you help them understand their own problem, or you really step into their world? Now, all of a sudden, if a year later you have a solution or a product, they're more likely to listen to you. But
mm.
in a sense, it's like you're bringing them all together. And that's why I love, like, when you talk about that purpose driven, impact driven personality doing a podcast. I look at it through the lens of, like, a startup founder has to be that if
Mm.
they're really gonna make an impact. So what are some of the things you look at? Like, you probably have a pretty good sense when you start talking to somebody. Are you a purpose driven or impact driven person? What are some of the things you see that are like, okay, this is somebody I could really bring a lot of value to?
Well, I think it starts with vision. What's the vision of the future they're trying to create?
Yeah.
And if I could understand that and they're able to articulate that in a compelling way, then I start to pay attention to what is the end outcome that they're striving toward. And it could be a number of things depending upon the situation. Once we know the outcome, then I look at what vehicles have they deployed to reach that, whether it be the business, whether it be a nonprofit, it be media. What are the things they've done to help to bridge the gap between the vision that's in their mind and the outcome that they desire? And then, to your point, and you kind of alluded to this, it's you almost got to be obsessed with getting to that outcome.
Yeah.
And if I don't sense that someone has that obsession, that deep yearning and desire to get to that outcome, they will likely fail. They
Mhm.
will likely not get to that point. And I hate to say it such blunt terms, but that's just the reality, is
Yeah.
that a lot of people have ideas and vision and want to do something, and it could be the greatest idea ever. But are they obsessed enough to get there? And so
Yeah.
I'm looking for vision. I'm looking for understanding the desired outcome. And I'm looking, are they obsessed enough to get there?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about amplifying impact, and that's
Mm,
something you've promoted a lot in the discussions we've had. I loved what you said earlier, and I think it would be great if you would share with everyone. What are the three secrets for amplifying impact that most people miss?
yeah. So the first thing you always have to think about beyond anything else is, where is my audience showing up that other people are not actively finding that person? And looking for those secret pathways is going to be helpful. So first things first, think about what everybody else is doing and say, what's not being done today that I could tap into and experiment? I'm a big believer in challenging conventional wisdom and looking for pathways that maybe don't already exist or people don't know exist, and then start to experiment to see if it potentially could work. The more you experiment, hey, if it's not working, great, then try something else. That's the first thing. The second thing is, a lot of people forget the power of leverage, and they forget that there are leverage points that exist that other people are in fact doing, and they're doing it very, very well. So this is like the opposite end of what I said in the first thing, which is, now let's look at what the most successful people are doing that have leverage. It's so important. What I mean by that, I'll give you an example. So there are a lot of people trying to grow a podcast. Very few people do paid media on podcast players.
Mm.
Why? I don't know, because it's such an easy way to get in front of a podcast listening audience. And it's not terribly expensive. It's the fast pass. It's the shortcut. It allows you to get in front of a podcast listening audience in a very, very quick way. So that's just an example of a leverage power play. And then the last thing, I think at the end of the day, we are all here for a reason. What's the thing that's calling us to do the thing that we do? And so getting clarity around what our calling is, what's the thing that's getting us out of bed in the morning, and then making sure that you reflect and you do a daily exercise to visualize what will allow that calling to reach the impact that you want. So I'm a big believer in seeing things happen before they happen. If you do a visualization exercise that allows you to see you doing your calling and actually imagine the most minute, fine details of it and see yourself wherever it is. If it's on stage, it's great. If it's flying to the moon, whatever, like you figure out what your calling is and visualize yourself doing it. So step one, look for unused or unfound ways that you could reach your audience. Step two is use leverage power plays that maybe not everyone's doing, but the best players are doing. And step three is visualize yourself getting to the destination that you want to get to.
Nice. Yeah, and you shared one story. Just to tell us a little bit about some of the people you've worked with and how you've helped them to achieve that.
So I mentioned Dr. Laura Berman. She's one of my favorite and long-term clients that I've ever worked with. For us, we have so many clients that have done amazing things in their life. So we're working with a client right now, Bobby Macchia, who runs this show called Business Unchained. And he owns 17 Dunkin' Donuts. He has his own family office business, very successful guy. But what he's trying to do is help people be unchained from their business, because all too often we see it. People go into business because they don't want to work for corporate. They don't have a boss. They don't want to do the things that you do in corporate. And so therefore they're going into the world of entrepreneurship. And then they quickly realize that it's actually even harder to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so what he's focused on are systems, tools, leverage, approaches that will allow people to run successful businesses, but to not let their businesses rule their life.
Yeah.
So he's another guy that I've worked with that we started working with early this year. And it's been fun to watch his journey. We have so many fun shows. We have another show that's a show about the Constitution, and it's put on by Utah Valley University. It's the biggest university in Utah. And so the idea behind this show is to help people who maybe don't really understand the Constitution to learn about it. And so the first season is all about the presidency and the Constitution. And it's very timely, as you can understand, based on the election cycle. And so I like that we have the ability to work in the education space and work with professors. We can work with social impact entrepreneurs. We could work with founders. We could work with health and wellness experts. Another show, I'll share this last one. We're on a break right now, but we worked on a show called Off the Cuff. And Off the Cuff with Danny Priori is a comedian who has had his own mental health challenges. And so it's a mental health podcast, but with levity, with humor, and bringing it's basically the whole mission behind it is reducing the stigma that people have around mental health and inviting conversation. And so we've had some amazing guests come on that show. So Off the Cuff, Language of Love with Dr. Laura Berman, Business Unchained with Bobby Macchia. Those are a few that come to mind, and I could just go on and on. I mean, so many fun projects, and I have some shows that I can't even talk about right now that are about to be released that are like, oh, just mind blowing.
So good. That's awesome. Yeah. So I would think a lot of people may think that it's really hard to start a podcast. I mean, if someone was just like, I have an idea, I just want to try to bootstrap it and like kind of give it a shot. Like, what all is involved? Like, how hard is it to get started?
You know, it's funny. It's both. It's so easy to start a podcast, and yet it can be daunting, overwhelming, and complicated. So part of it depends on the person, okay? And what their both appetite, desire, and current knowledge when it comes to technology and the inner workings of production. It all can be done by watching YouTube videos or getting, like, I have a guide. So if somebody listening or watching right now, find me on LinkedIn, I could send you a guide that will walk you through all of the parts. So, but just like somebody goes to a gym and they often need a trainer or want a trainer for accountability, there are people, myself included and others, who can guide people through the process. But what's involved is, I think everything starts with intention. What's the first and most important reason, the number one priority, why you're doing it? And then what is the intended outcome? And then everything else is reverse engineered from there, which is, what's the avatar of the listener? What's the show concept and how is it differentiated from every other show that's out there? What's the construction of the show from a segment, intro, CTA standpoint, all the elements? How do you give people a flavor of it with a trailer? How do you have artwork that helps you stand out while making it clear what the show is about? How do you have the right guests that will serve the audience, because you need to be that advocate for the audience? And so, yeah, there's layers to it. It's not rocket science. It's all totally doable. So if you're watching or listening right now and you're like, I don't know, it seems like a lot, take it one bite at a time. Start with why you're doing it and really refining that, and then figure out what you want to accomplish. In a year from now, if this podcast or YouTube channel is successful, then X. I will have more clients. It'll improve my brand ability, credibility, et cetera, et cetera. I love, my favorite part of this, of everything that I do, it's helping people launch. And so that's why we have products around, like launch a podcast. And so to me, it's just a fun way to get messy in the creative process and help people build something that they feel proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, one thing, I mean, people have heard me say a lot as I have dabbled in the world of YouTube, and just the more I dabble, the more appreciation I have for what goes into a good YouTube channel or any kind of media channel. You know, I think sometimes we see these people that have channels like, oh, look, all they do is like goof around and, you know, do a couple of gags and they've got, you know, 10 million followers. It's like so easy. And, you know, you really start to get into every layer it from the, you know, the concept to, you know, the filming, the sound, the production, the post-production, the audio, the descriptions, the links, and, you know, all these different layers to it. And, you know, I've come to a simple conclusion after, you know, close to 300 videos. It's like, it's really hard. It's really complicated. And, you know, I look at, like, even in that, you know, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of it. When I look at channels like, you know, of course, Mr. Beast is like the obvious one, but, you know, that's a channel that started out very basic and simple. And yet, you know, when you watch today, it's highly complex, hundreds of people involved, lots of different things. So any channel that's got that really strong following, that really clear brand, that, you know, polished production, even if it seems very simple, there's just so many pieces.
Oh, I've seen this
it.
firsthand. I mean, my son was in a Nelk video. If you're unfamiliar with Nelk, they do pranks. And say what you will about those guys, they work their butts off. And they are like hardcore. To your point, there's a lot of work that goes into pulling off these pranks from all the things that you've mentioned. I mean, people don't reach success accidentally. They reach success because they put in the effort, because they got some help along the way for people that could give them some advice or strategy, or they learn really well by doing and implementing learnings to the next version of what they do. And I do think YouTube is such a great platform for people who care enough about putting out content that they can make better over time, and recognizing that your first version does not need to be your 10th version. Think in versions. Thinking version 2 will be better than 1, and version 5 will be better than 2, and so on and so on. Give yourself permission to make messy progress.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so let's just briefly talk about what is kind of like level 1 podcasting, level 2 podcasting, level 3 podcasting. I mean, like you said, you could have 10, 20, whatever, but like, what would be like, you know, just a very basic to polished and good, and to like, this is pro grade?
Well, level one is turning on a microphone and pressing record and not caring what the outcome is, and then publishing it. So level two would be give yourself a bit more structure to the experience, the listening experience, and creating segments or containers that allow people to get used to a system or a model of what the show looks like. Step three, or the third version, is you do all of that, but now you're thinking about how do I make sure that I'm reaching the audience in an effective way. So that could be YouTube strategy, your podcast growth strategy, and that you're actually finding ways to make sure that the distribution of your show is as wide and effective as possible. And then, like, beyond that, then you start saying, okay, how do I bring people on board to help me up level in all those areas, up level in the show construction, up level in the strategy and show growth, and then scale it by doing more of the things you've been doing and making those things you've been doing even better than the way you had been doing them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, kind of follows the launch, grow, thrive model that I always talk about, where it's, you got the launch is getting it to the point. Okay, I found an audience. I think I've got a good message to, like, okay, now I'm bringing in a team and I'm putting in systems and I'm expanding it. It becomes maybe more than just one media channel, but it becomes more of like a whole media company, if you will. And then
Exactly. And that's what the bigger shows are doing. I mean, the bigger shows, it's almost without exception, it's a team. It is a team sport. It's not, there might be one person that's on the artwork and that's behind the mic, but behind that person, around that person, is a team of people who support and help that show be what it is, what you listen to or what you watch. And so
yeah,
remembering that is an important piece. Now you could get there. Mr. Beast didn't start off with a team of hundreds. He
right.
started off very small, and he grew into it. But it starts with actually pressing record. Got to
Yeah.
press record.
Yeah, got to press record. That's the Think Media tagline. It's a good one. So before I want to get into the team a little bit more for your business, but before we jump into that, just one last quick question. I always think, like, what would be like the first bootstrap version? Let me bounce this off of you to see if it sounds right. I mean, it sounds like inexpensive microphone, something to like record and capture the digital audio file, and then maybe like Buzzsprout or something like that to stage the podcast.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah. So if you're gonna go bare bones and you just want to get started, go to Amazon, get an external mic, one that's highly rated in the $50 range. If you have a little bit bigger budget, I would go with the MV7 by Shure. It's a really good mic. And then get a boom arm like this, which is it's a Rode PSA1, and they're $100. And so you don't have to have it, but I do suggest. Now, some of the microphones that are like the $50 microphones, they come with a stand. So if you're going really cheap, get one of those that are highly rated. I do suggest, your instincts are right, Buzzsprout for distribution for the audio. Just make sure that if you could also do Spotify for podcasters, and then you could have video. You can have video on Spotify even if you don't do that, but you have to actually go into Spotify and upload the video separately. The other piece to it is YouTube is not just a nice to have, it's a must have, in my opinion. If you want to have better analytics, more algorithm support, and frankly, more upside potential. And so making sure that you record, and you don't need to have anything fancy to start. Content will always be king, meaning what you say, how you say it, the insights, that's what people want. You could have, I mean, don't get me wrong, like you could have both. Like you should have good recording and good audio, good visual, and you have good content. So, but the content, if you have all the right recording, but the content's not good, it kind of doesn't matter, because beautifully recorded content that's not interesting to people will just get passed up. It's a competitive landscape out there. And so I use the s'mores effect. Excuse me. Graham cracker's great, chocolate's great, marshmallow's great. You put it together, you get magic. So how is your show combining something? And this is why Hollywood producer says it's this movie meets this movie, to help people visualize and understand what the show is about. And so I would start to think about what's the it factor, what's the unique value proposition of your show that's not yet out there or not done in the way in which you're planning on doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. So let's talk about how you started to grow your business. And you started hinting at it early when you first got started, and you started to get a few things, started to get some clients, and then all of a sudden you brought other people in. What was it like going from solopreneur to now having a team, and what did it look like to grow and scale once you got up and running?
It's a journey. Like, you learn a lot on the way, right? So I think the first thing is I wanted to understand what it would take for my own show to be fully operationalized from a production standpoint, and what are the inner workings of that. So I did that to start. And then from there, I said, okay, if I want to support other people's shows, I can't just use my team to do it. So I found talent and global talent. So there's tons of people around the world, in Europe, in Asia, in South America, and here in the US, of course. So I have a global team, and some of the places where I have team, cost of living is far less than here. So it's a overall a lower cost for my headcount. So I built a team, have my personal editor is in Eastern Europe. Love this guy. He was my editor from day one on my show. Now he's the head of production for our video and audio team. And so the way I've built it is find clients and make sure that I have enough team to serve those clients, and then gradually, incrementally bring on new team members and bring on new clients. Our clients come from referral. They come from content that I create, which brings people knocking on the LinkedIn door saying, hey, tell me more about what you do. Or we also do outreach, where we reach out to people and learn about what they're doing in their world. And we look in a highly targeted way. So is this an impact driven entrepreneur, leader, speaker, author? And then have conversations. Networking. I mean, LinkedIn is a 24/7 networking event. The more you can leverage the power of it effectively, sky's the limit. You can meet anyone and everyone practically. I mean, most people are on LinkedIn, and lead with value, lead with caring, lead with wanting to understand more what they're about. Because not everybody's going to be the perfect fit to be my client, right? So just figuring out what the right, to find the right fit. And then if they're not, you can still give them the value that you're capable of giving in your space. So for me, it's like I have a ton of guides and support tools and things that I do with my launch clients that I just give away, because I want people to have that guidance, regardless if they're going to be my client. They may know somebody that doesn't want to do it all on their own. They might need, I call myself like the personal trainer for podcasters that want the accountability, want the person who's by their side, shepherding them through the journey. And then for those who want that, I'm here. And then for those that don't, I can provide a lot of the tools that I use to help people, because it's going to help them. And then they're far more likely to think of me when somebody might be a good fit.
Yeah, that's great. So talk a little bit about systems and processes and technology that, as you're, kind of bringing this team together,
Sure.
a global team, a distributed virtual team.
Yep.
What are some of the things that were really helped with that?
Oh, I love this topic. Yeah, man. So there's a lot of tools on the back end that make the system run. We started with Trello. We've since sunset Trello. Now we're at Monday. So we did Trello internally, and then Monday for our clients for project management. Internal communication, we use Slack or WhatsApp, depending upon the client. And now we're on ClickUp. So ClickUp's basically replaced Trello. It's on the verge of replacing Monday. It doesn't quite have the same aesthetic appeal and call it user friendliness that Monday has. As far as the rest of our tech stack, a lot of what we do is automation based. So my co-founder is a computer scientist. So we have Zapier on the back end, helping with the sales process. We have a DM playbook. What is this? A DM playbook is, how do we message? How do we talk about our business? And so for our sales team, what does that look like when they're sending emails or messages and making sure that it aligns with the types of conversations we want to be having. So that's more of an internal resource. As far as other technology pieces that we use, all of the recording platforms that our clients use, we're well versed in. All of the hosting platforms, so that's Riverside, Squadcast, StreamYard, uh, Zencaster from a recording standpoint, and then from a hosting standpoint, we use Megaphone. Uh,
Okay.
and so, but our clients use Libsyn, Buzzsprout, you name it. Like there's Simplecast, Captivate. There's so many good ones out there. And then let me think if there's anything else that would be valuable to share. Yeah, give me a part of the process and I'll tell you more. But yeah, those are just a few of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just, just so many different, it's like a tech stack and it's people and all the different systems of communications.
Mm,
So, thinking about even just the one client you're working with, talking about how do you make sure your business isn't controlling you or kind of running your life kind of thing. What are some of the things you found there? I talk about that as the thrive category. How do you get to the point where you've built this business, but it's fueling your life, not
yeah.
constraining or limiting it.
Well, I would say it starts with trust and identifying the right people that you can trust. And then the other thing is give people pride in what they do. So I heard this great story, which I'll share briefly. Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the probably top 2 or 3 nonfiction books of all time, productivity books of all time. And his dad, Stephen Covey, told him when he was about 8 years old that he was going to give him a job. And that job was to keep the grass in front of the house clean and green. And he said, and he walked him through what that means. Keeping it clean and green means it's well manicured, it's mowed, and there's no leaves on it, and all the things that it means. And he said, I'm going to help you if you need help. So please ask me when you need help, but I want you to keep it clean and green. Do you understand what clean and green is? And so he said, yeah, Dad, I understand. Da, da, da. So he helped him understand what good looks like. He told him he was there as a resource and he made it clear and wanted to make sure that he understood what's involved. And so I think in business, we have to do more to empower people and inspire people and less to control and command people. And so giving them the keys to their own success. And so I think that's a big part of the thrive, as you call it, or a big part of the letting go of what you don't need to do. And so I like the fact that when I go on vacation, I don't need to be immersed in the business. The business will run with or without me. Now, I'm still valuable. Like no question about it. I'm still needed. And I think as we continue to grow, the more I could bring on other people that could do exactly the same thing I can do, the
Yeah.
better. But I think at the end of the day, we have to figure out what are the systems, what are the process, and what are the people that will allow the systems, the process, the tools that we use, and the people all collectively create a workflow and a dynamic to where the business can operate as effectively as possible, where you can remove people from any part of the equation and it'll still work without a hitch.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. So I'm thinking about your audience being the kind of the purpose impact driven person. I'll say founder, but just someone who's got that interest in spreading their impact and they're ready to kind of launch a podcast, not sure where to start. What
Mm.
would be maybe the advice you would have for them? And, what are some of the things you might do if you were working with them?
So the first thing I would suggest is write down on paper what why you want to do it. What's the why behind it? And thinking about that, that's the intention, that's the why. And then, if it's working with me, then simply book a call where we would go through and you could share that with me. You paint the vision, you tell me why you want to do it. And then as far as like working together, we work together on a weekly basis on all the parts of the equation that I had mentioned before. If somebody's not working with me and you still want to do it, I can share that guide, it's like incredibly detailed and thorough, comprehensive step by step. if for whatever reason you don't want my guide that I'm going to give you for free, then I would ask yourself the question, why? But there are other people out there too that can help in this regard. I mean, ultimately, if somebody wants to build something, you got to look at like who's building it for other people, or who's been successful at building it. I don't care what it is. If it's a podcast, a YouTube channel, like you're working with Sean Cannell at Think Media. Here's a guy who's done it successfully. And so it makes sense that you would want to leverage his knowledge, his expertise, his experience. Find people who have done what you want to do and like be relentless about it. Make a list of everybody who's done what you want to do, and then network, meet them. Like, you'd be surprised. People are so afraid to just send that initial note or make that comment. There are so many ways that you could get into the mind and get into the world of people who you would never think you could. You just got to be willing to just go out there and do it. Like, it's shocking to me how many people, even when I was first starting my podcast, came to me and said, "Can I be on your podcast?" I'm like, you want to be on my podcast? And I was just like shocked by this.
Yeah.
But it's because I had the podcast that then people came to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what are some of the best ways to do that? And I'll be sure to share those in the description as well.
Yeah. So you can email me, Billy@podify.com, or just go to LinkedIn. Just type in Billy Samoa, send me a DM. I do my best to get back to DMs as quickly as possible. I super candidly, I feel fortunate that I have a lot of people sending me DMs. So just to give me a couple days at the most. But what I would say is, if you're looking for content about podcasting, about the creator economy, about monetization, follow me on LinkedIn. You won't have a shortage of that. And let's talk. Let's have there's a link on there. You could schedule a strategy call where we could talk through your concept.
Awesome. Yeah. And below I'll include the email address, the website. If you'd like, I can include the link for the guide.
Sure. Yeah.
Sounds like
perfect.
a great resource as well. So Billy, this has been awesome. This is just so great to hear your story. And it's just such a cool journey that you've had, and such a cool thing that you do for the company.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a fun. I mean, I could talk to you all day about topics that I am passionate about, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I know it takes a lot of work to both be a full-time professor while also managing your own media business that you're building. And I'm loving what I'm seeing you do. And you're obviously somebody who cares deeply and is on the, you're yourself, you're an impact driven leader who's helping people do the things that they want to do to create their brand and to be a creator, but to do it with thoughtfulness and systems and tools and do it without also breaking the bank. Like, all of those things matter, because especially for people just getting starting out, they may not have the ability to just throw money at it and say, okay, I want somebody to do all this for me. Yeah. If you don't have that, like, what then? And I appreciate that you give people guidance in that area.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you. And Billy, thanks so much for being here. This was awesome.
You got it, man. Thank you.
All right, keep going.